So, welcome, welcome, welcome. If you don't already know, the Greens of Colour is a subgroup within the Green Party group, and we are a liberation group, and we work together to talk about issues that affect BAME and people of colour. So that includes Black, Asian, minority and ethnic groups. But I also like to call this the majority of the world. So a lot of these groups make up a large majority of the rest of the world. So we really want to engage in what is affecting them and how their communities are being affected, but here in the UK. So 3 things that we aim to do is we aim to support the Green Party in communicating and engaging with communities of colour, including those who are BAME. We also look to promote people of colour and BAME friendly policies to the party and a way of like engaging them as well. And lastly, what we like to do is to focus on building good relationships between the Green Party, the GOC, which is us as a group, and campaigners and wider organisations as well. And the way that we do that is in a variety of ways, but one of those is by hosting events such as these. And so I'm sure you all know what the purpose of this event is, but just to reiterate, the purpose of this event is to really hear about from our councillors, our Green Party councillors, what have they been up to during this COVID situation, and how have they seen firsthand how COVID is affecting our communities within their respective areas. And I think this is really important because actually, although they're councillors, there's different ways in which we can help our local councillors where we live, but also mobilise as community groups together to sort of echo some of the things that they've been doing, all the good practice work that they've been doing. We can really share that in our areas as well. And so being able to hear from them and to be able to learn best practice is definitely the way that we are going to be able to give more rights and support other people where they may actually need it in this time as well. So I've really, really enjoyed speaking to you all to find out a little bit more. And if you do want to find out more about the Greens of Colour, you can visit us on our website, and I'm going to share all that information with you as well. And we're also on social media, and I'm going to share all those details with you as well. But I'm sure I have spoken for way too long, and we have amazing speakers on the line right now that I'm really, really keen to hear about them. So firstly, just to introduce them, we have Kaltum Osman Rivers, and she is an elected official, a councillor in Sheffield, has done some amazing work since 2018 that I'm sure she's going to be able to share with you, that talk about, you know, the situation with COVID and being consulted on what is happening within our community, but also being able to talk about violence reduction within young people and also FGM issues as well. So Kaltum, I'm sure there's so much more that I need to go into in detail about the great work that you've done, but that is just a quick introduction on Kaltum. We've also heard, and we also have our councillor in Bristol called Cleo Lake, and Cleo has been a councillor for 4 years and also the Lord Mayor. But in her work, she has done so much to support issues around colonialisation and the issues within systemic racism in terms of the Windrush scandal and highlighting that and how bad it was. But also she works a lot with her community, with people from all different age ranges as well, trying to mobilise them, engage them. She does a lot of community work in form of dance, which you've already heard about as well, which I've had the pleasure of seeing a snippet on social media of what she's been up to. And so that's just a brief introduction about Cleo. And we also have Naveen, and he is from Leamington, and which is in Warwickshire, and he's been a councillor for a year. And even in that time, he's been able to juggle both his, as he mentioned earlier, his full-time job and understanding and getting to grips with what it actually is to be a councillor in the local area as well, and trying to represent those people. So without further ado, those are our 3 panelists. We're really, really glad and really, really welcome, happy to have you all. But just before we get into the detail of what has happened during COVID and how have you been able to speak to your communities, I just wanted to ask you one quick question, which is, why did you become a councillor? Like, why did you personally become a councillor? We have, in the Green Party, we have over 372 councillors. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of people don't know that there are Green Party councillors and there are BAME Green Party councillors at that. But why did you want to specifically be a councillor, and what was like the core issue that you wanted to work on? So if I start with Naveen, and then Kaltum, and then Cleo.
Hi, thanks Azzees, thank you. So answering your question, the first one, like why I've become a counselor, I was actually, to be honest, sitting there is a Hindu temple here in Leamington, and I go there like once a week or once a month or something like that. And I met the Green Party the lady here, Janet. I think you know that. And I was introduced by her, and I had a tendency to work something for the community all the time, but I didn't have anyone. I didn't know anyone here to because I was new to Leamington, and so just having a talk to her, and she mentioned what they do, and because I work in the environment sector, so I wanted, like, I'm an environment friendly person, so I have decided that working with with the community and doing something for the environment is a good start. So I joined the Green Party. Nothing, to be honest, nothing to become a counselor or something. But I wanted to work for the something for the community and the like, environment. And then I have been told to stand as a counselor. So I said okay. So I went on, and I won. It was not expected. But yeah, so now I am really busy because I have a full-time job, I have a family, and but yeah, it's now I'm getting really busy. And during the COVID-19, I had the opportunity to work from home, and which is good. I used to work from home anyway, so because these two things like together, I am now having a grips on the what, like how can I contribute to the community and the environment, and yeah, this is what I am doing now.
Perfect, thank you. Kaltum?
Uh, it's the $1,000 question. I'm not going to say 100. A question that's actually asked of me a lot, because in Sheffield it's very Labour, and the majority of the community from the BME community or people of colour community and refugees, asylum seekers, everybody kind of is expected to be Labour or be voting for Labour. But I grew up in Brent, an area that is very in London. And when I was growing up, I was quite fed up of negotiating the system for myself and for my community at a very young age, where I had to translate, interpret. Even when I learned English, I was just going after school and helping people. And then I couldn't see anyone who looks like me in a political arena. And then moving to Sheffield, I wasn't a politician when I moved to Sheffield, but I think most of us are politicians anyway, because if we want to ask the system a question, that's in us, in all of us. Whether you stand or not, we all ask that question. And I was asked a few times. I think before Machid, I was asked to stand. And because I was doing my master's, I said I'll do it after Machid. And stood. And one of the reasons is because I'm quite fed up of not really, the council is 84 people elected, only 8 are from the Bayma community. And so you can imagine how very little Muslim women, Black women, in all kind of different boxes that I could tick is very little. So I also encourage a lot of the young people to join the Greens, and I'm quite happy to actually speak to any areas and to come and make sure that we support them, to inspire them. So I stood as an academic, I'm an academic, but I stood as a politician to kind of get more people into politics, but green politics rather than other politics. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I guess more directly it goes back to 2012 and episode in Bristol where we just had our first elected mayor, so we're into our second 4-year term of elected mayor right now, and there were certain things happening in the community, such as our very popular and culturally important St. Paul's Carnival, which was, nearly 50 years old. That was cancelled, and it caused a bit of huge outrage within the community. I was attending community meetings, etc., etc., and getting involved. Actually went on to chair the carnival from there. But I can remember running alongside that was also all the funding being pulled from the Malcolm X Centre, which in Bristol is the African Caribbean Community Centre that was funded really off the back of the 1980 uprising. Some of you might want to recognise that as the riots, and I know Brixton will be commemorating 40 years next year, but Bristol was actually the first inner city to clash against the forces of the system. And from that, we had the Malcolm X Centre. So in 2012, the carnival was cancelled. The Malcolm X, all the funding was pulled from the carnival. The Malcolm X, which was still a council-owned building, was in danger of being taken off of the community and just handed out to anyone. It was very unclear. So a couple of us decided to attend and put questions in and statements to full council, which was completely and utterly out of our box because we'd never ever attended a full council meeting. So we put these questions in and we figured out what the system was. We put questions in, we went along to this full council meeting for the first time ever and was just astounded that out of 70 councillors, there wasn't one who was from our community. So that kind of highlighted to me, well, how can we expect anyone to have a clue about our journey, our history, our current situation, if we're not around the table to express this? So that was in my mind, but I had no intention of joining and becoming a councillor until 2015, when in fact I attended the elected mayor's annual address, which is usually held at Bristol University. I went along to hear what was being said. And at the end of it, I bumped into a councillor who in 2012, 2013 actually supported a few of us to fund a mural of Windrush in the community. And I was speaking to him and also our Green mayoral candidate at that time, and they suggested to me, why don't I consider standing as a councillor? And I didn't think much of it. And then someone tried to say, stand in this area. And I thought about it a lot. But I had another opportunity come up, which was as an artist. So I took that. And then it actually turned out that I think early 2016, someone who I knew actually was standing as a candidate, a guy called Asif Khan. But he landed his dream job in Scotland. So there we go, another reference to Scotland. He landed his dream job, so he pulled out the race. And then they were left with a candidate short. So they asked me again, and I said, oh, all right then. And yeah, the rest is history.
Amazing, thank you so much. It's really good to be able to hear from you all, like what was the sort of the thing that led you to where you are today, because I think especially coming from you know, a lot of us go to Green Party meetings and oftentimes we may be very few BAME people in the room, but to be able to see you, to be able to hear from you personally, I think it really does make a difference to know that actually we can be elected as well and have these green principles, and we don't have to stand for a different party just because that's the only way to get elected. So thank you all for the work that you are doing in your communities. A question then about COVID, then moving it slightly on. You know, it has been extremely distressing to hear about the data that is emerging with how BAME communities particularly are being affected by COVID. And there is an inquiry that's going to be looking into the causes of this. And we really want to find out from you, you know, what is your perspective on that particular situation? Is COVID highlighting something that is already evident within our communities and COVID is just a way of this coming out? Or is there something else that is more deep rooted in health or other concerns that we should be looking at? And what have you seen in your communities and how the BAME people in your communities have been affected? So I know there's loads of different questions, but I guess I'm trying to encompass it all to be like, what have you seen on the ground and what are your thoughts about how BAME people are affected? If we start with Kaltum, Cleo, and then Naveen.
Thank you, Azzees. I think with COVID-19, first of all, when we talk about inequality, it did shed light to some of the underlying issues, but a very deep-rooted health inequalities where public health has missed out completely. The damage that's been done for years and years of not addressing the health inequalities of the Bema community came to the service. The other thing is, in terms of how it affects our communities, is what we've seen. I'm originally a Somali, so you can imagine what it's like for those who migrated, but also the communities before the ones who migrated in the 90s or 80s, and you can imagine the history of the African Caribbean community there as well. So I believe, and it's one of the things that I've been really worried about, I've always been worried about, and I have always been involved in, was highlighting health inequalities in the Black and African Caribbean specifically, and the African community in London. I moved to Sheffield, and that was one of the reasons why I moved to Sheffield. I was a research assistant to highlighting the exploring the needs of visually impaired refugee communities, and the fact that the whole system missed them. In terms of, there was the first research that's been ever done in up north to look at disability and migration, and what we found was it wasn't the first time that kind of thing was found. So you can imagine how that's catching up with the communities. The other thing that's really affecting the communities is not investing in the areas where the communities live, is housing people in, so they look after their own, don't they, kind of attitude, where you put families in the same kind of buildings that have not been looked after, renovated. We know what happened in Grenfell. So that's a highlight on the housing side of things. And so if we actually look at a whole holistically, it's all inequality and institutional racism in the system that is COVID highlighted. What people then becomes a stereotype is we cannot tell them how to social isolate because of their culture, which we can come into, because that was also the racism within even the voice and the language used during the COVID-19 meetings that I have been sitting as well.
Yeah, just adding to that, there's, I think, a variety of reasons why we're hearing such devastating, painful, every day there's another story that's, you know, if you read it, you're going to be reduced to tears because it's quite overwhelming actually. But for many of us, it's nothing new, but it's right in everyone's faces now with statistics and evidence that no one can deny. So the slight positive to it is I hope more people now are more widely aware of the circumstances of people of global South heritage and how inequality has led to death. One such element when we think of health conditions, and this phrase, underlying health conditions, I think it's important to recognize that, for example, many countries historically, if we think about the Caribbean, you have to go back and see the legacy of really shocking and humane episodes of humanity, whereby, for example, there are people living today, so it's in living memory, where people may have survived in terms of sustenance on sugar. That would have been their diet because they were so poor and left with nothing that was what they survived on. So actually places like Barbados, they are statistically and proportionally a country which has the highest number of amputees because of diabetes. So there you can see a direct link from enslavement, colonialism, and underlying health issues and inequalities. And that's something that is very, very serious. When we think of reparations, that is very tangible, and is slightly encouraging to hear that Bristol University, for example, will be partnering with the University of the West Indies to actually address this. I think it's been, on another note, it's been really difficult, well, not difficult, it's been hard to see, hear, and lose people that I know personally, particularly elders from the African Caribbean community. So we know that this is real, that people are dying, they're dying around us. And, you know, to see elders attend a Zoom funeral, this is going to be something that is traumatizing, and it's trauma on top of trauma. Um, you know, other things that we're aware of is the economic impact, and we do have a very good organisation in Bristol. It's based in the Southwest, Black Southwest Network, and they've just released a report today on their findings. And surprise, surprise, people of our backgrounds are being hit the worst by this economically. So for many of us, these are just broken records that continue to chime out throughout our lifetime, throughout our parents' lifetime, throughout our great grandparents' lifetime. And now, please, can we find a way to be heard and for this to stop? Because, you know, we really have reached a peak here where I don't know how we can fail to see everything that's going on. And it's so far ranging. You know, digital exclusion is now an issue that I'm working on. Also, when we think of the prison population, who is bearing a thought for people from our communities who are incarcerated? Some people pending trial, innocent until proved guilty, but now in a situation where they're highly vulnerable, again, because of certain underlying conditions. And for example, inmates with perhaps the sickle cell condition, it's a massive, massive emergency.
Thank you, Cleo. I'm going to come pick up on some of those points that you both made in a sec, but first I want to hear from Naveen.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, I just tell my experience was like I am involved with here the Asian community. Basically, I'm from India. I came here about 17 years ago, 18 years ago now, I think. And I have been close contact with all the communities. Like there is a big Sikh temple here. Leamington is a small town. You can check in Warwickshire, and I know the people of the Sikh temple here, the Hindu temple, and the mosque. And I have been quite involved in all their activities last year, and attending all the ceremonies and the functions and festivals. During this COVID-19, I have been calling actually the leaders of all the communities, asking if from the council side, and I have another separate groups who were ready to help. And I found here in Leamington and Warwick, I mean, the lot of Asian people are living basically with their children, and they found that they didn't have any problems. And the people who are living, like not living with their like parents or relatives, they have a regular like meetings every week, and they are getting supplies from, like, say the parents are living in Leamington and their children living in London or Scotland or something, or but they are making sure that their parents are getting proper supplies and medicines. So I have been talking to, because all the religious institutes were closed, and so I had to check with all the community centers where the Asian people meet and all these ethnic minority people meet. And I have checked here, and I didn't get a single person asking me for any help. And I was really surprised. And even still, I have given my phone numbers to everyone. And then please come. And if anybody needs any help of like supplies or medicines, there are people here who are ready to help. And there is a shielding hub here, which is already helping a lot of people. And talking to the councillors, I found here that there are more people who are ready to help rather than people asking for help. So I feel very sorry for the people who really lost their lives in during this, and they are our elders. But for people I know in my area, in my ward, all the communities, not only like I would say like all Asian or any everyone, all communities. I was asking that the people I know straight away, please let me know if anybody has like struggling during this time, even for the food, or who haven't got any money or something. We
Mm.
can still supply the foods and medicines. So, like I would say, my experience is I didn't get a single call from anyone asking for any help. But up till now, I mean, it's going up till now okay from the council side.
Okay, thank you. So I guess that's a really interesting position, because you are all from across different parts of England, and the way you're seeing that people need support is very different for differing areas. So I wanted to ask, Naveen, you spoke to the point about how you have practically put your number in letterboxes and gone to different community groups to ask how can you help, or if they need support, you are there for them, and you haven't seen so much of a take up. But I guess with Kaltum and Cleo, how have you been able to and tried to be able to support the communities in your area that require a little bit more support and a little bit more need? And especially Cleo, where you were talking about, many of the elders that you know that are passing away, like what could the council have been doing to try and support them in this time? Start with Cleo first.
Yeah, I should say that the ward I actually represent as a councillor is a fairly affluent, not particularly racially diverse area. And I've been supporting them by, feeding information that we get from the council, making sure that goes back out, staying in touch with the ward, and, just checking in on certain elders and other people, making sure they're okay. But by and large, they're very well organised and, hit the road running in terms of setting up different groups and supporting each other. So much of the work I do is actually, I'd say, more citywide to an extent. So it kind of goes a little bit outside of my allotted area. Um, One of the projects I'm working on at the moment is about digital inclusion, because it's quite clear that so many people don't have access to a laptop, a computer. They may have a smartphone. Some people can't afford data. And well, what a privilege it is to be here tonight on a Zoom meeting, or to have been able to do all those dance classes, or, you know, put my son on BBC Bite Size to do his learning, where so many people can't. And having put a call out to, because again, I find one of the challenges is trying to determine what work is being done and by who, trying to coordinate efforts so that, people don't fall through the gaps, and equally there isn't duplication, and etc., etc. And that has been fairly challenging, but it's quite clear that um, it's been a slow-ish reaction to support people, and there are probably only a couple of hundred families within the whole of Bristol, which is, 400,000 population plus, who've actually received, for example, a tablet or a borrowed laptop. Schools are really trying their best, but again, having put a call out to try and understand who may need support, I've actually been inundated with people who, for example, a family of four, the mother is disabled, she has one smartphone between four school-aged children, and is really, really struggling. And again, a lot of the requests for help is coming from sections of our community, the Bangladeshi community, other inner city community groups, some elders, etc. So that again this situation has really highlighted something that even myself, I was a little bit ignorant to. It's sometimes privilege is relative, and you don't always appreciate what you have until you can see what people don't have. And in a situation like this, you know, having access to the internet is such an essential element of how we're going to be able to move forward, how we're just going to be able to conduct our daily lives. So I think whilst digital inclusion has been a buzzword for Bristol, which is a smart city, which means we're a top city in terms of tech and blah, 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 actually, now it's not about just a slogan on a piece of paper. It has to be about the action, and it has to be action that is, okay, measured and thought out, but it has to be quick. And I think sometimes we're going to get bogged down and annoyed with the bureaucracy of a council system, which is why it's so important to collaborate and work with agencies, individuals, and other people who can make things happen, perhaps in some ways in collaboration with, but often quicker than the actual council.
Thank you. That was very deep. Yeah. Kaltum.
Thank you, Cleo. Some of the things that I picked, first of all, there's the immediate response, which is being part of the community response team, which is 9 councillors and officers supporting us. But cross-cutting that, I'm always bringing the BME and people of colour needs on the table. So having that hat on all the time is not, it's quite frustrating, because you know the system that completely missed out is not going to reach them now. So I'm also consulting with religious practices or funerals, and I've been consulting with the funeral bereavement services, because it's the cultural perspectives, but we're talking about different religions, not just Muslim religions. So 8 of us are included in giving that consultation. The other part is we had Easter, Ramadan, and now Eid to follow. So there's always that. But one of the things that I suffered most of my life is being a tick box. So in this COVID-19 response, I don't want to be a tick box. I want my voice to actually change something. And if there's going to be immediate steps of responding to this immediate need, I want that to actually be a tangible thing that we can touch. I went from delivering medicine to pregnant women who moved to the area and didn't know anyone, to helping somebody walk their dog with my hijab on, to actually literally just sitting across the other side of a room, making sure that somebody with mental illness is supported until they come, and while at the same time, obviously, distancing. But one of the things that I think Cleo touched on is the thing that we always hear on paper becoming reality, but it's always been reality for us. We've known it, we've dealt with it, we've seen it, is how disconnected councils are from those who are in need. And how many years are we going to keep on saying you are disconnected from them? And so I think our roles have become really vital in that voice, or bringing that voice. For example, delivering food. So there's mutual aid charities across, but even that, you have to think about, are they really reaching those people who never asked for anything? So to some communities, you do not ask for food. So they wouldn't go to food banks. They wouldn't go to mutual aid. They wouldn't call anyone. So for that, we had to make sure, myself and others, but specifically me in my area, we had to make sure there's a culturally competent person in that group who would actually think about, say, for example, a Somali group or Yemeni group who are fasting and not going to get their iftar from a food bank if they never asked before. So the whole concept has changed, where they used to go to the mosque to eat. And for that as well, we become, when I say we become vital in giving this information, we then get an email that doesn't really mean what you said, because it just follows, oh yeah, we recognize that. No, actually, you really do need to deliver this, aspect. So businesses and organizations and projects that are from people of color have suffered in COVID-19. And so therefore, while they try to reach, because they've got the cultural perspectives of the needs of their communities, they have nothing. So that's where we were trying to support. We're trying to support putting together people who can work together, and then we can try and get some funding for them, and kind of young people especially to appreciate that. I know you're affected, but also could you be able to deliver food to the other generations in the community? So some of the things that kind of make me quite sad is the fact that on one hand we're saying this intergenerational thing that affects the health of BME communities, but at the same time we want young people to kind of appreciate and support during the COVID-19. And actually, I would say really fair play to those young people from Unity Gym who have been delivering food to my area, and just to see young people just getting out and taking food to somebody, putting it outside their home, was so we don't give enough appreciation to young people. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to highlight, and how this is going to affect them in terms of their mental health and well-being, because we kept on saying the message says the young people are not affected, but young people actually are affected if they lose their loved one. Like in London, I've lost at least 14 people that I know. Some of them I grew up with them. So if I tell my 18-year-old that Uncle so-and-so and so-and-so died, how does that affect them? Yeah. So we that's one of the things that I'm working with some of the with Unity Gym, kind of bring the mental health and well-being of young people.
Amazing, thank you so much. I know we've got loads of questions that are coming in, so what I'm going to try and do is break up some of the questions and ask some of you to specifically talk to these points. So the first question is a question to all of you, and please try and keep this brief. We've got loads of questions. So the first question is, and I'm going to take them in rounds of 3. If you had a meeting with Boris Johnson, what one thing would you demand action on at a national level, and why? So that's the first question. The second question that I want to take to Kaltum is around, there are people who, there are being pregnant women, and what should the government be doing to support them? And what are your thoughts around vitamin D deficiency and the fact that this could be contributing to supporting people and keeping them safe? And then the question to you, Naveen, a second one, which will be around, in terms of environmental justice and the vision that one needs to have in order to push this forward, what role could people of colour and queer people be able to do to try and contribute to this agenda and making sure that it's something that people recognise as an issue that affects all people, intersectionality, with different intersectional perspectives as well? And the question to you, Cleo, is around, what are your perspectives on Boris Johnson and, the sort of new guidance that he has brought out? Is it too soon? Is it something that is useful to our communities? Is this the right approach that our communities should be taking, in being that we're saying unlimited exercise and going outside and meeting people and children going back to school? Is this potentially going to make more BAME people and people of colour at risk? So I know there's loads of questions there, but to take the first one first, which was about Boris Johnson, let's start with Naveen.
Sorry, what was the question? Sorry, Azzees?
No worries. The first question was, if there was one thing you could demand action on at a national level to Boris Johnson, what would that be?
It's a very, I don't know what to answer actually, to be honest. And but I would definitely go on the environment level first. That as this is a pandemic, so we should be learning a lesson from this pandemic, that there's a climate emergency coming in. So how we can prepare ourselves for the future if there is another pandemic like this, and plus the main thing was the climate change. So what can we do? I mean, my main question would be, yes, how can we protect our people from this climate change emergency coming in the future? That would be my main question. How can we well prepare ourselves?
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let's go on to Cleo.
My demand to Boris Johnson would be to instigate poverty reparations at home and abroad, and to introduce universal basic income.
So poverty reparations.
Yeah, so for me, throughout all of the climate emergency, what resonated more with me was thinking, well, actually, if all of the noise and support for the climate emergency was as equally as loud for a global poverty emergency and declaration, then maybe we'd actually have a chance of solving some of the issues.
Thank you. And Kaltum?
I think I nearly said something else, which is resign, but I will think about more of what to do in this sense. One of the things that the BME communities and migrant communities and everything have suffered is the whole language, the whole policy, the whole the way that they've been seen as less than the rest. So for Boris Johnson, I would actually say invest in our communities, but let us make those decisions. Do not, the whole point of, I mean, in the UK, I would actually say let us do the investing in our communities, in order to eradicate, deal with poverty, deal with hostile environment, immigration policies. All these rhetoric and stereotypes are not just words, they really are policies that are affecting our communities. And so let us be the ones who make these decisions and invest in areas that we're losing young generation in.
Thank you. And just whilst I have you still here, could you talk to the point about the vitamin D deficiency within BAME people, and if you know much about that, and what should the government be saying about that?
I would like to know more about if that is something that affected our communities, because every time that something comes up, it kind of stops the other investigations, such as poverty, such as housing, such as education and exclusion. So although in terms of health and health inequalities, it would be really good to kind of look at that, because I am one of those people who wearing a hijab or not, sometimes I'm a part-time hijabi, but still I have very less vitamin D, and I get, literally I have to get high doses every winter. So you can imagine those who don't speak much English, those who don't have the right papers to actually access NHS help, for those who can't afford to buy vitamin D over the counter. I think we need to there has to be a better investigation in terms of health aspect. We can't just keep on handing vitamin D and saying people are suffering. Why are they suffering? That's the other thing. People might be being housed in the wrong areas. Are there other underlying problems that are contributing to this vitamin D deficiency? The other, I think, was it just that, or was there something else in the question?
Yeah, about vitamin D. Perfect, thank you. And then we've got a question back to Cleo about where did it go? Oh yeah, about lockdown and whether it is the right time or not to have been called into this stay alert message.
Well, we all know it's a very confusing message, and I don't think it takes into consideration some of the information that's coming back with regards to how this virus is attacking certain people in our community. So the messaging is potentially dangerous, and as Kaltum referred to, the underlying um, issues regarding all of it, such as housing, such as economic situation, and the like, that isn't really being touched upon. So the other surrounding conditions aren't being tackled, or they certainly aren't being tackled hard enough. Equally, are the respect due to our migrant frontline workers, that respect and protection isn't coming in fast enough. So I think it's really risky. I can understand people who have different views to that. Perhaps people are a little bit more skeptical of the whole situation and of how life may pan out post this scenario. But I think there are some real dangers out there. And, schools, at least we've heard that people who decide not to send their children back to school, they won't be penalised. So schools now have the job of trying to resource distance learning as well as safely and adequately provide in-school education for the children who are going to come back. And let's just consider that it's going to be a wide-ranging attitude to that, because on the one hand, you have some parents who are struggling with homeschooling. It isn't going well for everyone, particularly, again, those who perhaps who are digitally excluded. So there are some people who are very keen to get their children back into education, and understandably so, because we already know statistics with certain people in terms of failing at school, etc., etc. So the gap with that is probably going to be widened the longer that some students are out of school. So there will be a need to get more formal education for some people, but equally, many parents will be very reluctant to send their children back to school, and I, for one, will be one of those. But I have the luxury of being able to educate my son at home.
Yeah, it sounds like it is a very troubling time, and it's varied depending on who you are, where you're from, what your background is. It's like, as much as it's easy for government to talk about BAME people as an acronym, as BAME or people of colour, all of us are facing different things, and kind of not having a blanket approach to how we are dealt with those who are on the front line and those who are at home supporting their children is something that I guess all of you are speaking to in the context of having to be really specific and support those communities as and when they see fit. There are loads of questions, and I'm really keen to hear from some people who are already on this call who have had their hand up for a really long time. So I'm going to ask everyone who is about to speak, I'm going to call on you individually. If you're making a point, please try to make this as brief as possible so we can try and get some more questions in. Or if you have a question, please try to make the question as succinct as possible so we can try and get as many questions as possible before time. So with that being said, I am going to call on Terence. Terence has his hand up for a really long time. And I think, Terence, you wanted to speak to the point about your experience as someone who is disabled and what that has meant for you.
Hello, yes. I'm chronically sick, disabled, have an handful of health problems. Going back to last year, I lost my father through a suicide, which made me more housebound, unable to get out. So I started doing online shopping. Of course, then when this virus came along, the online shopping became very, very difficult to get slots. I have had help through the minister that did my father's funeral. Has been very helpful. He's been going shopping for us to help out with the online shopping as well. But the community help is really important. In Warrington, they do have a good community help, which is nice. But it's been really worrying and really difficult, but getting through it, you know, with the help as well from this minister, which is, he has been really good, really, you know, in helping me get through this with shopping. My brother lives with me. He's disabled. I'm my mother. 82 this year.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing, Terence. I think it just goes to speak to, again, to the point of having communities to look out for people within the community has been really essential. We have another point that Rosemary would like to make. So Rosemary, if you want to unmute yourself and quickly make that point.
Hi there. So I was just going to jump in quickly on the point about risk factors and the vitamin D. So I know there's a lot of work at the moment that's being done to try and untangle the various different factors that are involved. And we know that inequality is a massive factor. I think the figures are that for BME people as a whole, there's the risk of 4 times that of the general population. Now, if you control for everything that you possibly can control for, so if you take out the effects of economic inequalities, of where you live, of where you work, occupational factors, things like that, you're still left with that goes down to 2 times. So there's still an increased risk. And so the question is, what other factors might there be? I think there's a lot of debate over the vitamin D thing at the moment. It's uncertain, the jury's still out on that one, but it's one that it may turn out that there's something in that. And as I said, there may be other factors that we're not aware of. But the inequality is a massive issue, and that cuts across all the different aspects. There's the economic factors, racial factors, other kinds of discrimination, living conditions, occupation, all of those things. So it's a really complicated issue, and I know there's a lot of work going on at the moment.
Thank you so much for sharing. Just before we go with the final round of questions, I do just want to say, if anyone has any sort of guidance or reports that they can share with us, please share. We're going to post this on our social media pages so that it really equips our communities with the knowledge of what they could be doing and should be doing in their communities, and just trying to offer some insight and support as to what is happening and how it's affecting them. And I think information is key in this time to helping people, reduce their anxiety about what is going on when there's so much that they don't know. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to switch gears for a second. We've spoken a lot about COVID, and I know that, this session probably hasn't given credit to as much detail as we could go into in terms of how it's really affecting BAME people and the things that we could be doing. But I think the councillors have spoken a lot to talk about some of the things I have here about the migration of communities, the trauma upon trauma that has been rippled into the inequalities that we do have, but really talking to the communities and going out to the communities specifically to address some of their needs are and have been a really great way of being able to identify and help them at the point of in which they need it. Digital inclusion is something that communities really do need to ensure that they are trying to speak to communities who aren't engaged on Zoom or online in the same way we are, and as a result is going to create further widening of the gap of inequality as well. And so what probably, as Cleo was talking to, was coordinating efforts as well. How can communities, and Kaltum was talking about how can communities coordinate efforts so that it's not all desperate at one point, but actually we're able to understand who is helping on the front line, where they're helping, and how else can other people intervene and volunteer as well if they have the time. So my final question is more generally around the Green Party and the efforts to engage with more BAME community members. So just quickly from yourselves, what do you think the Green Party could be doing, both nationally and locally, to help engage with more BAME people so that actually we become a voice, we become more of a prominent figure, and actually the party becomes more diverse outwardly as well as inwardly? So we'll start with Naveen.
Yeah, as per your question, I think we here in the Green Party already doing a lot locally, like we are actually elected 8 members this time, which is a big increase from last time, and we are already doing what happened in the planning system here locally, like a lot of things actually. I can't pen it down, but mainly we are doing everything locally. But nationally, yes, we can do more, like on the kind of like opposing HS2 more. As everyone knows, it's really a waste of money actually. We can do a lot with that money, doing something for the people in UK as well as for the environment. So these, for nationally, I would say, like spending that billions of pounds on HS2, we should be spending on like schools and highways and environment where people will be encouraged to work from home or going by the bicycle, plus on the health system. As you mentioned with vitamin D, money should be spending where the people need that money rather than spending on HS2, which is not a big important thing for me actually, or for a lot of people in Green Party, as would we think. Yeah, that's all I can say for this hour.
Perfect, thank you. And Cleo, you mentioned in the group leadership representation is important. What more could local parties be doing?
I think, you know, we've seen several times that certain positions they are given, or there is a position for someone from our communities, which sometimes is and sometimes isn't filled. I think internally we could do better at highlighting situations and opportunities wider. Even I've been in situations where either I've missed an email coming through or something or other, and I haven't known about an opportunity. So I think a little bit more effort to highlight. You know, we know that the leadership and deputy leadership and chair and various roles are coming up now. So there has to be more of a push to make sure that we all know about this, and really for the party to examine what the future holds, what kind of future we want, and assess whether to them, I'm talking the mainstream part of the party, whether they think and hopefully agree with us that it's really important that we put our voices at the forefront. So it's about what commitment there really is to that. But I think an aside of that is to recognize that all types of people are having all types of conversations, are caring about all types of things. And it's just that sometimes they're not at the discussion table. So I think we should also acknowledge that a lot of things are happening, will continue to happen. And it's about us tapping into that and finding people where they are, which sounds like a cliche, but sometimes, you know, that could be at the community cafe, etc., etc. Finding where people are that we're trying to, you know, bring into the movement, and having a dialogue with them on a really, really basic, fundamental level.
Yeah, definitely. Kaltum, do you want to quickly add anything to that?
That's really nice to follow up in terms of recognition of the work of the Greens of Colour. Each one of us it's automatically a member of Greens of Colour. So really recognizing, I think the National Green Party needs to recognize the hard work of the Greens of Colour, and those who, for example, if somebody says to me, come to Leamington Spa, if you say Naveen, we would do that, but then the Green Party needs to support that. And I think that's what I've been since I joined in, and I've been a Green Party member and a campaigner for a long time. What I've been missing is we need more Black people. It's not going to actually do the job.
Yeah.
What we need to do is, why should people of color be Greens? And that's the question should be that, because we have parties, especially Labour Party and Lib Dems, who have a monopoly on especially Labour, on Black people and migrant communities and people of color. And to be honest, the language needs to change as well, because climate change affects more of those people who come from the countries that have been ripped from, the wealth has been ripped away from. And so we need to flip the coin and actually see. So the Green Party needs to recognize the environmental campaigns also should come from us. So we should be included in many, and the leadership needs to work with Greens of Colour better, not just when there is a policy coming up that they need a little bit of a, what do you call it, some input, some words, some tick boxing, because we're tired of it. And I'm sorry, I speak my mind. You can imagine what I'm like.
Thank you so much. Okay, so all three councillors, thank you so much for your time. They need to leave at this point because we are at 8:30, but we will stay online. Committee members, if you're happy to stay online, that would be really helpful. I think a few more people have a few questions, and I'm just going to close out. But councillors, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for all of the work that you constantly do in the community. It is amazing to see you, to be a voice, to be a person who is there, making sure that our voices are at the table. And without you, you know, with you being there, you're an inspiration to us all. So thank you so, so much for the work that you do. And we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Before they go, could I just ask one question? If that's okay.
Yeah, they might just need to speak off though. We're just a bit over time.
It's a really quick question. Do you feel if we actually spent more time talking about our social justice policies within the BAME communities, that we may actually be able to turn the vote towards us?
Yes.
My answer. Yep, that's my answer too.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you very much. I have to go and cook iftar now, or at least put it on the table. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. Good to meet you all.
Okay, so whilst we have everyone still on the call, please don't feel like this is a time to rush off. I know you have a few more questions and I'm happy to take questions. But before I do, I just wanted to quickly share my screen. For those of you who may be supporters and not members, or not knowing how to get more involved with the Greens of Colour, I just really wanted to quickly share this with you so that you can find out more, and I'll just quickly talk over that. Can you see my screen? It's got so many things on it, hasn't it? Oh no, you can see this actual window.
Yes.
Thank you. So whilst you're here on the screen, yeah, if you want to follow the Greens of Colour and find out more about what we do, this is a way of doing it. We're on all social media platforms. Thank goodness to our two comms leaders and committee members with doing just an amazing job with talking about what is happening with our communities. If you really want to find out what's happening in the news, what different organizations are doing great work, we really try hard to promote all of that work as much as possible. And so we're not just a voice talking about green issues, talking to green people. We're really trying to do what we said in one of our aims, which is to reach out to communities and organizations that are doing great work for the community and trying to link up with them rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. So this is the way that you find out more about Greens of Colour. I'd really encourage you all to follow us on social media. And also, if you want to become a committee member, there are a few positions available, and we can share that more information about that with you as well. We just had a newsletter that just went out in May. So we try to keep in touch with our community to let them know what's going on. In addition to this, every single month when we send out a newsletter, we're also really encouraging people to write blogs. If there are blogs or things that you want to talk about, that you want to talk to the community, then feel free to share that with us. You know, everyone's voice is important. Everyone's perspective and narrative is also really important to understanding and demystifying and decoding how we can actually improve the situation for these communities. So those are the points that I just wanted to make about that. If you want that picture, we'll make it available online for you. So I'm about to stop sharing screen, so don't feel like you're missing out. And there was a couple of questions that I did just quickly want to take because they speak to the point about generally how can the Green Party be more inclusive. The Greens of Colour are going to be working up a document that will be sent out to loads of different local parties, talking specifically about things that they can do to engage with communities. Some of these, which I've shared with some organisations already, are about, you know, how can you just make sure social events take into consideration people who don't want to be in a pub, people who don't want to be in dog-friendly areas, or people who may have caring responsibilities that mean that they can't meet up late at night. So I know that sometimes that makes it really difficult to try and be flexible to everyone, but I think given the fact that COVID has highlighted there are new ways of working, we should be thinking about newer ways of working that don't mean that it's really difficult for people to get involved. And so as the Greens of Colour, we'll be sharing that information with the Green Party soon. There's lots more work we need to do with it as well. But that's one of the things that we want to do. In addition to that, there's a lot that the Green Party are now recognising the Greens of Colour as being real vocal groups. So actually what they do is they come to us for loads of different policy items, ideas about how they can communicate better. I was just in a meeting last week with Polcom, which is all the senior people within the Green Party and elected officials as well, talking about some of these issues, about inequality, about social justice, about the NHS, about people being shielded and they actually haven't said that they actually want that. So oftentimes we are now, because we are so organised, because there is a big group of us, there's over 15 now, we're working really, really hard, and a lot of Green Party people are getting in touch with us directly about our thoughts. So it's really, really encouraging. In addition to that, lastly, I just wanted to mention, and I'm happy to take any questions after this, we have another event and we are on a roll. Like, we are on a roll to have fun events, but also really informative events as well. Our next event is going to be 17th of June, and it's going to be about community solar energy. Now, the reason why we wanted to do this, by the way, you're the first to hear about all of this. The reason why we wanted to do this is because, you know, the sector in environment is often seen as a very middle class and white industry, and it's not, we don't see oftentimes so many of our communities getting involved in projects like this, and sometimes it's really difficult. But we have a community solar energy that is predominantly run by a BAME people, and they will be talking to how they can encourage other BAME people to really champion some of these issues. And so we're really excited about how we can make sure people find out more about this and other things like this. So this is obviously the first event, and the next one is on the 17th of June. You're going to find out more about it. But yeah, that's what's happening with the Greens of Colour. So please feel free to stay engaged with us and find out more. Rakesh, I'm going to call on you. Is there anything else I am forgetting?
No, I think you've got everything. That's good.
You got everything. Okay, cool. Does anyone else have any questions that they want to ask or felt like we didn't answer so far? You have my time. So feel free to raise your hand or to... Yes, Carmen.
Hi. Hi. I think there's somebody called John Fox who said that there's an absence of can't really remember, but basically I think when there are main meetings or something, or